A very good morning to the audience in-house. Today we are here for a debate competition. This house believes that students' incentive payment should be increased. Without further ado, I would like to call upon the government team on my right to present their points. We will start with the Prime Minister.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to jury, respected timekeeper and the audience in-house. Today, our motion to be discussed is about student incentive payment should be increased. I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to tell you the definition of internships. Second, I'm going to tell you what is the first point. So first, definition. Internship is a structured work experience related to a student's major or career goal. Internship is also experience that should enhance a student's academic, career, and personal development. Last but not least, it is an experience that is mutually agreed upon by the student, supervisor, and faculty member. An internship also offers you the opportunity to work with someone who can become a mentor for you, not only in the internship but throughout your career. That's why nowadays internship is very important for students, and every student who is going for internship will be paid allowance. The first thing that I wanted to touch about allowance, as we know that every colleges or university that are under government will be paid an allowance to students who are going for internship. But my question is whether the allowance given to the students by the government is enough. Well, my answer is no. It is not enough. Why? It is because there is a lot of students who complain that the given allowance doesn't enough to support them. And most of the students who complain about allowance are from other states. I've done some research that 85% of students who is going for internships in Kuala Lumpur are from other states such as Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, and many more. As we know, Kuala Lumpur is a well-known city with many job opportunities. That is one of the main reasons why there is a lot of other state students come to Kuala Lumpur for their internship. This has resulted that students complain that allowance given by the government is not enough because students from other states have to spend money to rent a place to stay nearby the place where they went for work. Usually students will rent a place to stay like terrace, a condominium, an apartment, or a flat. I also did some research that the highest price for renting a house is 3,000 ringgit and the cheapest price for renting a room is 430 ringgit per month. So there is a college called ITBN which provides 300 allowance for intern students, and every intern student will be provided a place to stay. 300 ringgit is enough. If that college provides place to stay, maybe you only have to spend a little bit money for transport. But there is a college called KDU. They provide 500 allowance for intern students without providing them a place to stay and without any transportation. Do you think it's enough? No, it is not. Can you imagine what if a KDU student rent a room for 450 per month, meaning 500 ringgit minus 430 ringgit, you only left 100 ringgit, 130 ringgit. 130 ringgit for transport, food, or maybe a daily items.
Alright, thank you, Prime Minister, for your points. Now I would like to call leader of opponent to present the points.
Thank you for from government. True, many students from other states have come to the Kuala Lumpur for industrial training, but as far as I know, there are institutes that offer and send students to work together offering accommodation clinical students by spending money on food and drink. But I do not agree that students have to rent accommodation because some institutes offer accommodation and food. Students can also make scholarship loans to support their own life. Next, students from other states can stay at relatives or friend house. That means students only have to spend some money on food and drinks. And where in our country the allowance can be increased as some students undergo industrial training. Besides, now undergoing industrial training have their own allowance and have effort to keep and live on their own. Because of that, student understands that money allowance cannot be that easy. So students go to college and undergo industrial training to earn their own allowance. Allowance may also allow industry training students to purchase their items such as food, stationery, clothing, transport, and more. With the allowance, the students can help their parents by buying clothes, drink food, even if the allowance is limited. For students in the country undergoing industrial training, for them the allowance is sufficient and sufficient for the student of industrial training. And last, students undergoing industrial training can use their allowance to help their friends who need money to buy manufacturers.
Thank you, Leader of Opponent, for your points. Now, I'd like to call the Deputy Prime Minister to present points.
Thank you to jury and opposition leader for your point. From the article that will in reply speech presented by Prime Minister, we found that today's youth need to spend almost all their money to cover their daily expenses such as transportation and food. This article is about youth. Now, I'm back to our motion, which is about raising allowance for internship in Malaysia. As you can imagine, it's only about single person in Malaysia who earn a fixed salary every month, while interns only depend on their allowance. It is the allowance that interns use to continue their need to spend several months of industrial training. The rise in food and transportation costs year on year makes it hard for interns to support themselves throughout their internship. Even firms that do offer compensation may not be able to fully cover as such costs, and many interns fork out their own money to cover the balance. Interns who work with employers that pays a small allowance are left to figure out how to cover their losses during the internship. This increase in allowance is necessary as it helps people who are less attractive. It carries the burden of parents whose payments are less than 2,000 to support the interns needed. So this is the reason why we need to raise the allowance for internship. We here to pass this up to help interns who are originally from a difficult family. This internship is our main concern as a government. Dear opposition team, we don't just have to think about when they are at work. Even after working hours, we should consider. I have one question for you, opposition team. Do you eat only once a day? I believe that you eat more than once and often, don't you? So, imagine if your employer properly provides food allowance during working hours. It is good for the interns. But now we are discussing in a general term that all interns in Malaysia, they have to prepare themselves for breakfast and dinner, where most people eat rice and side dish, and it's time to replenish after almost half a day work. In addition, having to spend money to eat, those interns also need to think about daily commute to work, which also requires money. One of the worries that interns are thinking of is also the transport to work. Transportation is a problem when an intern student has to take a bus or train every day. This problem is encountered by interns who have trouble finding a rental house near their place of work or not provided accommodation by their employers. As presented by Prime Minister previously, they are lucky they can stay at their relative or friends who lives in their area of Kuala Lumpur. So, one problem is solved, but transport is another problem or a big issue. For those who need to get on public transport, they have to spend their commute every single day. In terms of public transport expense, they have to pay for transportation like bus or train fees. This public transport system uses a card payment method that is specially used to charge money. So to make it easier to pay for those public vehicles, they can top up money to the card once a month, but in the amount that can afford to spend for a month. They can top up the card value using their allowance, so they don't need to ask their parents for top up their card. Besides spending on public transport, interns who use their own vehicle also avoid running out daily expense. Without petrol, these vehicles can move. Although using motorcycles only, petrol is required. Spending money on petrol is not just a small amount, it is still a huge waste of money. So, when it comes to spending house rent, the remaining are all for them to spend is a minimum per person.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for your points. Now I'd like to call Deputy Leader of Opponent to present her points.
Thank you for government team speaker number 2. Sorry to say, I'm not agree with your point because people with RM 1000 until RM 1500 single pay status are not eligible for allowance because their standard of living is less money than the status of married people RM 1500 until RM 2000 ineligible for allowance for family support and relatively high standard of living such as bills, water, bills, electricity, cars, house, and more. Single people can live in rented lots and can save on living expense by sharing their rent. Besides that, for a trainer, they can think and work together to solve this problem. They can ride in public vehicle provided by the government. They can also ride friends' vehicle and share vehicle at work. Returning to single status people in their valley areas spend about RM 1,870 a month on public transport. Here I would like to say, younger people when they are mature, they can manage their money well. They can take the initiative by sharing a lot of vehicles at work and they only have to pay the cost of their friends' vehicle on. There is saved you the expense of getting on a public vehicle and within a month their expense did not reach RM 1,500. The point is, in this case, we need to look at the current environment and economy. The rise in price of food should not be an issue as price of raw material and rising and scarce. We as buyers need to cultivate in our nature the care. If we are prudent, they may be able to control their cost of living and the issue of transportation problems will not arise. Allowances are only given to newcomers with RM 300 bachelor degree. Those who have at least 3 years of work experience are employed. Experienced people will know how to manage money. This is not to increase the allowance, but to adjust and give only to those in need. Allowance should also be noted that they do not waste with unless need. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opponent. Now I would like to call upon the last speaker from the government team, the government whip, to present her points.
Thank you for the opposition side. I disagree with what the deputy leader of opposition said that paying allowance for single status are not eligible. Because their using standard of money for living is less than the married status. For me, I'm strongly agree what Deputy Prime Minister said just now. Because nowadays, status for a single person also have already spent a lot of money on public transport, food, and especially for them who want to further their study. Several of them live in the club where they need at least 1,217 a month. Prime Minister also said that many students who is going to internship in Kuala Lumpur are very far from their state. That is why there is a lot of students who complain that the allowance that given to doesn't enough. And most of the students who complain about allowance are from other states such as Kelantan, other state that far from Kuala Lumpur. In addition, part-time students should be treated or promoted at work because they are not paid as daily workers, so this allowance will increase their motivation to work and make them work better. Besides, the employers in Malaysia also have to ensure that interns do not do regular paid work that employers are expected to do. Additionally, the tasks performed by interns should be done for free money. Their own benefit is the experience during this internship can improve the quality of work. Employers should take this issue seriously as they the law implication. Other than that, allowance helps students to cover medical expenses as needed. Because if medical expenses are too expensive, how would an intern want to cover the cost? And it will affect the health of the student. Here I can summarize with all those evidence researching and those examples that increasing allowance for all the intern students will help them to manage high cost of living at the moment.
Thank you, Government Whip, for your points. Now I would like to call the last speaker from the opponent team, the opponent whip, to present his points.
Thank you for the government speaker 3. Sorry to say, but for your information, I disagree with your point. I think a lot of giving allowance to students of the institute is not recommended because the majority of students enrolled in the institute is capable young people. Why don't parents send their children to a private school? Why they can afford the cost of their children's education just like they work for a factory? They have to buy clothes, shoes and utensils to sit there. At the government institute, they are also allowed to go home every week. And during the holidays, their parents make sure they give their children money and they do not touch their allowance. Therefore, they are not entitled to a high allowance. Furthermore, for students coming from low-income families, they can find part-time jobs on Saturday and Sunday. In this way, they will be able to reduce their financial burden. I agree with the opposition point of view people with 1,000 until 1,500 single pay status are not eligible for allowance because the standard living is less money than the status of married people. 1,500 until 2,000 is eligible for allowance for family support and relatively high standard of living such as water bill, car, house and others. Single people can live in rent lots and can save on living expenses by sharing their rent. Here I want to conclude with all this evidence that I have given, and this evidence can confirm that it does not raise allowance for all intern students as they will waste money on things that go wrong like buying a wish from necessities. They live here. I hope that government can accept our argument well. Thank you.
Thank you, opponent whip, for your points. But then we have come to a conclusion. Both the teams are given 2 minutes to present on their reply speech. We should start with the government team. I would like to call the government team to present on their reply speech, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, so as the leader of opposition said, there are colleges or universities that provides accommodation and transport for students who are going for internship. But are all colleges and universities provides accommodation and transport? The answer is no. Not every colleges and university provides accommodation and transport. Therefore, we should be considerate of students who go in for internship, where the colleges or university does not provide accommodation or transport for the students. Do you know how much a single person, which is workers nowadays, spend daily? Here I want to quote an expert. I did some research and found from daily newspaper website Karya Metro, individual single person who use public transport and live in the Klang Valley needs at least 1,870 ringgit a month to cover daily living expenses. You can Google it on this website www.metro.com.my, which is written by Abdul Basaruddin. This article was published on Tuesday, 5th March 2019 at 10 a.m. I I did some research on house or room rentals in Kuala Lumpur for students. So here is some picture. The picture in this paper shows different types of accommodation with different prices. As you can see, the second picture, there are no facilities. This room does not provide any proper beds or proper closet. This means that the student still has to spend some money to buy pillows, blankets, and maybe a small closet. What about transportation? There are many transport facilities in Kuala Lumpur such as Grab, taxi, bus or LRT. But these days, public transport getting expensive. Furthermore, food and drinks are becoming more expensive nowadays. Everyone knows that the standard of living in Kuala Lumpur is very high. This factor affects the cost of food and beverage. In Malaysia, we eat 3 times a day. But what about the students who like to hang out at the cafe doing their paperwork? Even if a student orders just a cup of coffee, do you know how much it costs for 1 cup of coffee? 1 cup of coffee, it costs about 12 ringgit 70 cents, and it is really expensive. Opposition, you did mention about private school. Do you remember that there is poor people in Malaysia? My last word is that the allowance given by the government is not enough, and the allowance needs to be increased for the benefit of students who is going for internship.
Thank you, government team, for the reply speech. And now, I'm giving chance to the opposition team to present on the reply speech, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Some students don't like to go with their parents whenever they are studying. They are more likely to buy something with their own money. Teenagers can provide themselves when they can get allowance. For example, students spend most of their money in college, like food, book, and pay their exercise. They pay for their tickets and buy food and drinks from the college. If they have some pocket money, they don't have to ask for anything because they will be able to use some of their money. According to this is how teens really spend money, what they love and where they spend. The majority of teenagers spend on clothing and food. In their own experience, they go shopping every 3 months. They can do this and not bother the student parents because they already have quite on money from the allowance. Allowance for teens is the first step towards independence. Teenagers should get the allowance to buy what they want.
Thank you, opponent team, for your reply speech. With that, we have come to a conclusion, meaning that this House believes that students' incentive payment should be increased depending on the institute's allowance which has been provided right now. Besides that, another factor that also we need to consider is that where is the practical was being offered to the students. Is it in the Kuala Lumpur city, or is it outer skirt of the district? It depends on the location. Therefore, thank you.